Dr Wajid Akhter, you've been in the post of Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain for a year now. What would you say is the central insight or learning that has emerged from your first year in office?
Assalamu alaikum, jazakallah khairan for having me here. I'm going to answer that question with a story. If you go to any accident and emergency department in the country, in the world actually, you will find people who are working incredibly hard, looking after patients, taking blood tests, investigations, maybe somebody on their way home or on a break. But it's a hive of activity, as any A&E department would be. But even in that A&E department, you have a red phone. And that red phone, when it rings, it signifies that someone is on their way into the A&E department who's on the edge of life or death. We call it a resus case. They need to be resuscitated. And every second counts, every action counts, every movement counts for that individual, which is why they ring the red phone. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, doesn't matter what your job is, doesn't matter if it's your lunch break or you're on your way home, everyone comes together because you need to save that life, and every minute is critical. The reason I'm telling you that story is because much like an A&E department, what I've realized over the last year is that we have the disease and the cure in the Muslim community. We have huge problems with unemployment, but we have people who are upskilling our community. We have problems with education. We have people who are working on that. We have problems with youth engagement, and there are lots of projects being delivered for that, charities, mosques, and so on and so forth. So for every problem, there is a solution. But the problem is that red phone is ringing off the hook. And there is no sense of urgency. There is no sense of we all need to come together in an emergency to save the life of this community, which seems to be in sometimes existential danger. So that's my central realization, is that I've always said that I'm not in favor of revolutions because you can have a counter-revolution. I'm in favor of evolution because there's no such thing as a counter-evolution. So a gradual, sustained, organic process by which we change. However, in the last year, I've realized we need that evolution to take place at a revolutionary pace. We need to get our skates on. We need to have a sense of urgency. We need to make change and make that change quickly.
So in terms of the learning that's emerged, it sounds like you're speaking about it in two parts. One, how bad or how difficult things are on the one hand, but also it seems as though you're saying that there's something of a lack of awareness around that. In the context of the analogy that you gave, when somebody's coming in, in that life or death situation, there is an awareness, right? Everybody knows, right? Clearly the person themselves is, in between life and death, those around the person bringing them in, those who are about to respond. So I'm trying to understand what the issue is here exactly.
What's missing? I think the awareness is there. Everyone you talk to knows that we're in a bad way, knows we're in a bad situation, knows that things are getting worse. But the action is not commensurate to the problem, right? The speed of the action is not commensurate to the problem. We are seeing, disaster unfold before our eyes, and we're not moving at the pace that we need to. We have this kind of lethargy. We're moving at a very slow pace. We know that change needs to come. We'll have another meeting. We'll have another strategy session. We'll have another discussion. We're not getting on with it. And this is something that you see, like when they say that a country is at a war footing, for example, things happen, things move, things change quickly because it has to, because it's an emergency. So it's similar to the red phone ringing. When this country was at war in World War II, World War I, things changed, and they changed very quickly. They got rid of all the signs on the streets because if there was a German invasion. They confiscated maps. They turned off all the lights. Cars had their lights covered. And this didn't happen over a matter of years. This happened in a matter of days, hours. We are in a situation like that for our community, and not just here in the Muslim community, but globally, and we're not moving at that pace. innovation, change, and ambition is really with people who are on the other side of the field to us. If you look at reform, it's a very good example. The way that they've transformed themselves, and I know we tend to look at reform from one angle, that they tend to have policies that are antithetical to the Muslim community. But if we look at them, the way that they've changed themselves, the way that they've taken on board social media is impressive. We haven't had a Muslim organization that's been able to do that yet. So we're not really responding. The digital revolution, the social media revolution, AI revolution, and we're way behind the curve. And it's not just in the technological sense, but it's in the organizing capacity sense, the ambition sense, the realization that we need to work together. And a point I would make is that we have done this. Because a lot of people say, well, we can't do this. It's impossible. This community can never work together to that level. We're just too diverse. We did this for COVID. We did this for Gaza. This community really came together and mobilized in a way that it's not been done before. Lots of the normal command and control structures, or the things that held people back, disappeared because there was an urgency. And now it's time for us to see that urgency in terms of our place in British society here today.
Is it possible for you to characterize the problem? So for somebody who's come completely outside of this community, they don't have any exposure to it, or maybe they live in this country, but if they heard what you're saying right now, they might not recognize what you're talking about. What exactly are these particular issues, problems, sources of emergency that you're describing?
The problem is multifaceted. I can give you examples. So, for example, the way that we coordinate. We have Muslim organizations that are operating in pretty much every sector now. We have organizations in the financial sector, in mosques, in education, and so on and so forth. But there's a total lack of coordination. I mean, people will know each other, they meet each other at events, but the actual organizations don't coordinate. And so what you have is amazing organizations that are doing fantastic work without any funding. And you have funders who have funds to give and they don't know where to give it. What you have is people with immense amounts of talent in a particular area and not really being able to get that talent to be marketed or shared with others because they don't have any marketing skills. So we're, as a whole, as a community, as an infrastructure, we're really not operating to the best of our ability. We're like a football team which has some individual star players but just haven't learned how to play together as a team. So you're going to lose every match.
But that speaks more to like the response. When we come back to the coordination problem, but I'm talking about what are the actual issues at the grassroots level that need responding to, that need the coordination to actually solve.
What is there not to coordinate or that doesn't need solving? Look, as our community lives in this country, we have problems with housing. We have problems with healthcare. We have problems with education. We have problems with unemployment. We have problems with getting into, having a disproportionate number in prison. And people will argue, well, that's a lot of people convert in prison and so on and so forth, but we still have a disproportionate number. We have problems with grooming. Our response to the grooming crisis quite often is to pull out statistics and to say, the number of Muslim men involved in grooming statistically isn't more than any other ethnicity or is less than. If you start talking statistics when someone brings up an issue like grooming, you've already lost the argument. Why do we have a grooming problem in the Muslim community? Why do we have a problem with unemployment to the rate that is, or the divorce levels that we have? We don't even actually know what the divorce rate is in the Muslim community. But pretty much if you ask any imam, they would say it's roughly about 50%. That's anecdotally because no one's done the research. How can this be? Why do we not have the research? What's wrong with us? And the knock-on impacts of rapidly rising levels of divorce, what that has impact on children or impact on finances and impact on productivity is, again, something that needs to be unpacked. I was at a medical conference and a Muslim professor, he said, this community is going to have a tsunami of cancer hit it in about 10 years' time. And I was the host, and I was like, those are two words you never want to hear in the same sentence, tsunami and cancer. Why are we going to have a tsunami of cancer hit us specifically? And he said it very clearly. He said, we're a young community, so we've been getting away with it, but we do not do cancer screening. We're not interested. We don't go to the doctor unless we're at death's door. We don't get, and I know I'm generalizing here, but you have to generalize at some level. We don't engage in prostate cancer screening, mammograms, cervical smears. We just don't do it. And it's fine when your average age is 25, but when your average is 55, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have cancer, and you're going to have a lot of it, by the way, because a larger number of Muslims smoke than the rest of the population.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think the last time I checked, somewhere between 40 and 50% of Asian Muslims have smoked or are smoking, when it's about 18% for the rest of the population. And you can argue on the statistics. So there isn't really an area where we don't have a problem that isn't urgent. Each one of these problems can be fixed. So, for example, in Malaysia, they instituted premarital counseling. So before you get married, they will counsel you on how to have a good and happy marriage. And that reduced the divorce rates by 30%. We could implement that tomorrow in this country. We've got the knowledge, the expertise, the people, and the funding to do it. We just don't have any sense of urgency to get things done. We just don't see, if it's not affecting me, the divorce rate in this country is not affecting me personally, so why am I going to put my finger out? It's not, it's not affecting my mosque, so why would, it's everything seems to be, we'll deal with it another day, or we'll shove it under the carpet, whether it's, lack of safeguarding, whether it's diabetes, reaching epidemic levels, whether it's lack of activity, mental health problems, so what? 1 in 3 Muslim children in the last year thought about committing suicide. Just put it under the carpet. Just put it all under the carpet. We don't need to talk about it. So we've got this attitude. It needs to change. That's there's a lot of hope. Like I said, the disease and the cure is out there in the Muslim community. So I don't want to paint a picture of hopelessness. I just want to get across to the audience that there is a sense of urgency. Move fast and break things, but move fast now, because time is running out. And if time runs out, then we will all pay that price.
With regards to the issues that you've mentioned, my suspicion is that a lot of the things that you've mentioned, they're not specific to this community, number one. And then even if there are issues of disproportion with regards to certain things, what I've always struggled to understand is what is the faith or the religious link to the problem. Because if we're going to define it as a Muslim community problem, is that really accurate? Or is it actually in some cases more specific to, for example, Pakistanis or South Asians or a specific ethnic demographic within the thing? Because it's very difficult to appreciate and to understand why, for example, it's the specific Muslim link, if you like, that is different from the actual ethnic component. So, and it's important because if we don't sort of diagnose or understand the problem or frame the problem appropriately, maybe we'll approach it from an angle that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, or unnecessarily frames it as a Muslim community issue, whereas maybe that's an issue of
wider society
correlation, wider society, as opposed to kind of causation.
You're absolutely right. We have the data in some pockets, and don't get me wrong, a lot of amazing work has happened, especially in the last 10, 15 years, in terms of building that data and that profile so that we can get that granular data, what specific problems affect the Muslim Nigerian community or the Pakistani community in Bradford versus the Pakistani community in London, because they're different too. But it's sat in a PDF or a dusty shelf somewhere. It's not operationalized on the ground. And that is another problem. And another problem is that we do tend to ghettoize our problems. I'll give you a good example. In the last week, Australia introduced a ban for social media for anyone under the age of 16 because the evidence is overwhelming. And this is something I actually lecture on social media and healthcare. So the evidence is overwhelming on the impact social media has on children. And officially in this country, you should not have social media under the age of 13. 800,000 children under the age of 5 are on social media in this country. 800,000. It's mind-blowing. And a lot of the algorithms will show you like suicidal content or pornography within minutes, really, of just turning on social media. So you can, if you say the right things, if you start liking the right stuff, you'll end up down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go. So they made that decision. They said children under the age of 16 should not have social media. That's something that we should have in this country. It's not just something Muslims should have. It's something that in this country we should say all children should have a childhood, and we should introduce that. And if Muslims take the lead on it, that's fantastic. But you're right. It's not just a Muslim problem. Sometimes we need to be specific. It's a problem of certain sectors of the Muslim community, maybe certain geographical locations, maybe certain ethnicities, because we're able to talk about it openly. But that's another problem I found. We can't talk about things openly. If you say this is a problem within the Pakistani community, you will struggle because people say, oh, you're being racist. People are very defensive in our community. We don't like to hear bad news. We don't. We always like to own, Mo Salah or Nadia, from Bake Off, but we don't want to own the problem, the drug dealers on our streets or the groomers or whatever. We don't want to say that's our problem. But the guys who do well, yeah, we take the credit for that, but we're not going to take any credit. We have the people who do anything wrong, they've got nothing to do with us. People who are responsible for people smuggling, a lot of them are Muslim, unfortunately. We cannot shy away from this nonsense. If we're not going to talk about it, it's never going to get fixed. Why do we have a situation where, the number of Muslims involved in that famous trial in France? I forgot her name. The Pellico trial. The lady who was drugged by her husband and then given up. The Muslim community should think about the fact that out of the 50 men, I would say at least 1/3 were Muslim. What's wrong with us? There's no conversation. Push it under the carpet. We don't want to talk about it. We have to talk about it, and we have to have difficult conversations without fear of saying we're washing our dirty laundry in the public, or that we're targeting a specific community. If we don't talk about it openly, in good faith, the podcast title, then we're never going to overcome it.
But just intuitively, though, just what I'm trying to understand is whether you think there is actually a connection between the conception that these individuals have of their faith or their religion or what is allowed or what not allowed, some framing that they have, or wrong as it might be, like between their understanding that stems from a religious understanding and then practice, or is it that just happens to be part of their almost like a socio-political or ethno-cultural identity, which is actually not directly connected to the fact that they happen to be disproportionately involved in, grooming or what have you?
I don't have evidence for this, but I think there's always going to be something wrong when you have a society or a group of people who have fallen so far. Like we have a sense of ummah. We have a sense of, we were kings and sultans, and we were the inheritors of a proud civilization. And our faith gives us that confidence that, we're supposed to be leaders and to be, vice regents on earth. And that compared to our reality is very different. Our reality is that we're people who are coming out of physical colonization, still grappling with mental colonization in many ways, struggling in terms of being behind technologically, behind educationally, struggling with different senses of identity, because identity seemed to transfer into national identity for 100 years. And now we're living in a post-national world, and the sense of ummah is coming back again. So when you have a large group of people who have this discrepancy between where they see themselves and their place in the world, regardless of where they're from and where they actually are, then, yeah, I think there will be problems. There will be problems, and I'm not blaming all those problems, like all these problems on the situation of the Muslim world, but I think that there's a unique issue with Muslim communities because we see ourselves as the leaders and we're anything but.
Are there any areas where there is leadership being shown or a disproportionately positive outcomes within the community or positive contributions relative to the wider sort of society?
Absolutely. I know I'm a pessimist, glass half full kind of person, but...
Glass half empty.
Yeah, glass half empty, you're right. is full of cyanide. The community is one of the most engaged, most active, faithful communities that's out there. In a world that has made faith really, boring or passé, we're clinging on to ours at great personal risk. In a world where it's not cool to do things for others, it's usually cool to build your own portfolio, hustle culture, become a billionaire, make your first million. We're actively trying to look out for other people. And in a world that, says it's about me, myself, and I, my country, nationalism, my tribe, we're actively looking beyond our tribe. So you have people here who are putting their career, their life, their money on the line for a war that's happening in Gaza, never having been to Gaza, not having any family ties, not being able to speak the same language. But they feel intrinsically connected to that. They find themselves emotionally driven. So our community, mashallah, I really think is one of the, is one of the most amazing communities because we have held on to something that many other communities have lost. That faith, that sense of community, that sense of helping out others. I'm not saying that other communities don't do this, by the way. They definitely do. But at the level that it's ingrained in, you can walk into any Muslim community anywhere in this country and you will find young people who are volunteering their time for their local mosque, for their youth group, who are putting their time and energy into learning more of the Quran, learning, reading hadith books. As someone said, when they were, I can't remember, it was one of Napoleon's generals, when he was trying to conquer a village in Egypt, he goes, it's like they're a nation of monks. They're all praying and fasting and reading Quran, and we do come across a little bit like that. So there's something definitely deeply impressive about our community. We just need to unlock the potential that's buried deep within.
But that sounds like the kind of approach, attitude, like the ingredients for success or progress. It seems to sit in tension with what you said at the beginning or towards it earlier on in the conversation, which is that actually there isn't sufficient urgency. And then also later you said there's a sort of a coordination issue or a lack of coordination. So on the one hand, we seem to have, it sounds like what you're saying, there's a flurry of activity, there is a sense of community, there is a deep-rooted faith, but on the other hand, a lack of urgency and a lack of coordination. But I'm struggling to
reconcile those two points. You can have a lot of work happening without coordination, which is exactly where we are in this country, pretty much worldwide. This is where we are. We have a lot of activity, but there's very little coordination. But the lack of urgency is as a group or as a society towards any one particular issue. So you may have urgency to clean your mosque or to get your mosque ready for Ramadan, but is there an urgency to say, how are we going to rethink the place of the mosque in British society, because we're hurtling towards an abyss right now. The Muslim community has this attitude where 20 years ago we used to look down or make fun of other communities saying, look at their churches, they're all abandoning their churches and we're having to make them into mosques just to keep the buildings going. Well, that's going to happen to us because we're investing in building more and more mosques and we're not investing in the people in the mosques. So go to any mosque, most mosques, again, I'm generalizing, there are a few mosques, like Somali mosques full of young people. You go to many other mosques full of elderly people. In fact, someone was like, you can't tell the difference between a mosque and a church anymore because they've just got chairs all over the place, right? Because of the elderly population. The elderly go, but the young people, it's not welcoming to them. They don't feel like it's their home. But we keep building more and more mosques. There's no urgency to saying we have a youth crisis on our hands and our youth are suffering from mental health problems and our youth don't have jobs. There's no urgency to the fact that, the government agreed with Waymo and Google to allow driverless taxis in the next 2 years, to license them in this country in the next 2 years. What's going to happen? That should be setting alarm bells off in the Muslim community, because that means the disproportionate number of Muslims who are Uber drivers are going to be without a job. And if they're all without a job and they can't earn money, then who's going to be paying into the mosques? And who's going to be paying into the charities? And then their health is going to get worse. And if their health gets worse, their children are going to suffer, and their children's mental health is going to suffer, and they might struggle to get married, or their marriages might break down because there's disproportion. all of these problems are coming down the road, and we can see it right now, but there's no urgency. There'll be one or two people who'll be talk about it, and what can you do? It's a fatalism that we kind of found ourselves going into. Like we said about the cancer tsunami, it's going to happen. What can you do? What do you mean? What can you do? We can, for starters, we could do something about the fact that we eat ourselves to death at every wedding, every funeral, every event that you go to. It's literally biryani swimming in oil. It's the same food. We're killing each other, but there's no serious discussion about, as a community, we need to be reducing it. We need to build peer pressure to, make our caterers make their food more healthy, less fried chicken shops. No, £1 burgers, go for it. £1 chicken and chips, go for it. Then 10 years from now, we're like, why are all the Muslim kids obese? Why do they all have diabetes? Why are they having heart attacks? My younger brother works in one of the London hospitals. He goes, if someone has a heart attack and they're under the age of 40, I don't even ask their name. I just walk into the room and say, Assalamu alaikum, brother. Because I know it's going to be Muslim. Guaranteed. And also, if someone's been shot or stabbed, I just go, Assalamu alaikum. And he goes, it's inevitable. It's going to be wa alaikum assalam. We have a problem and we're hurtling towards it. To the abyss, and there's there'll be one or two people who will come together and to do a webinar, or there'll be one or two people who come together. And I'm not blaming everyone else. By the way, like Muslim Council of Britain, this is our job.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question, which is that as far as the coordination problem is concerned, the Muslim Council of Britain is an umbrella organization to represent 500 plus affiliates and organizations. So yes, that was my question. Isn't it your job to then fix this coordination problem? Yes. And if so, then what progress is being made, and what sort of hurdles or struggles are you encountering?
It is our job. We haven't done it well enough. I know my predecessors have done a fantastic job of getting us to where we are right now. But again, we need that sense of urgency now to get to that next level. And the progress that's being made is that we're reforming ourselves slowly but surely, trying to get ourselves into a position where we can begin to highlight these issues and then actually begin to build the infrastructure throughout the country that can make a solid difference. So I'll give you an example. Local elections coming up. Everyone, we can all see it. We all like, where the rise of the right wing and where, what's going on. Well, let's do something about it. Why don't we have a get out the vote champion in 100 mosques in the key constituencies that are having elections, local elections? Because local elections, it's only like 200-300 people here or there that make a difference. We can easily get Muslims registered to vote. In the last general election, this country had the lowest ever turnout of voters, and that was 60%. For Muslims, during a genocide, it was 50%, and in most cases less. That's a huge problem, but also a huge opportunity. So we want to build that infrastructure where we have a Muslim Council of London, a Muslim Council of Midlands, who are going to identify the constituencies. So we have data experts who are going to say, these are the key seats with the key where we need to target, and we're going to identify the mosques in there, and then we're going to get out the vote champions in there, and they're going to sit in those mosques, have a rota, every prayer, sit there at the back of the mosque. Have you registered to vote? No, let me register you right now. You don't have your paperwork? Bring your paperwork to the next prayer. We'll register you then. Constantly, like that is infrastructure. On the day of the vote, guys, we're going to hire a minivan. We're going to take everyone. So you don't have transport. We're going to minivan you. The mosque will be a voting center. Makes it even easier. So that's the kind of infrastructure we want to build, so that when we say as a community we want to do something about knife crime, we're not just going to say it. We actually have the network to make sure that something gets done. If you did a program on knife crime where you told children, for every knife you hand back in, we'll give you a £25 voucher at Nando's, you would save lives. For what? The price of £25 at Nando's? I'd pay for it right now. People would want to pay for it. People want to invest in that, but they just need the infrastructure to make that happen. So that's what we're doing. It's slow, very slow, painfully slow work, and I apologize for the slowness. But if you're watching and you want to get involved in doing, the work that we've not done yet, build that infrastructure up and down the country, this is the time.
But the infrastructure then is simply what? Just having, all I'm hearing from you is like local city-based councils.
local city-based councils, regional councils, national councils.
I understand in the context of the voting example specifically how that might help, but that doesn't necessarily solve the urgency kind of issue. And also,
Yeah.
one could argue, actually just adds extra layers of bureaucracy or sort of, for a corporate example, sort of middle management essentially. So how does that actually then solve? If anything, it adds more parties or components to the coordination issue. No.
No, it helps bring us to the ground because the messenger is as important as the message. So we found this in COVID. If the Muslim Council had put out a statement to the mosque saying, "Mosques, close your doors. There's a pandemic. People are dying at unprecedented rates," no one would have listened. But if the Muslim Council put that out and had the network and the connections, had individual doctors, so you had a Deobandi doctor in the Deobandi mosque who they've known their whole lives, who they've seen in Fajr prayer, come to them and sit down and say, "Maulana Sahab, let me tell you, the number of people who are dying right now, they're dropping out, is in the thousands. We need to do something." That's a game changer because the messenger is as important as the message. And so what we're doing is we want to build a network where the key messages and the key action and components of the Muslim community are localized to you in your local community, as opposed to just like this anomalous body that nobody knows telling you to do things. You think, "I'm not going to listen to them."
I understand in a way, but the strange thing about that is that you're in your role right now because the very affiliates who you represent basically have representatives who then voted for, well, basically for you to be the leader, right? But then you're kind of saying, well, and they are the local organizations. So, but then you said, if you were to say something, essentially it sounds as though like the MCB to its affiliates, that communication line or that pathway to influence essentially, or a distribution mechanism for your messaging is ineffective. So that just doesn't make sense. It seems not to make sense to me anyway.
No, you're making a very good point.
Because it sounds like you're saying you don't have the authority that you have been given by the people who voted with you or for you. Sorry, but you don't have the authority with those same people.
You're right. What tends to happen, just to be very open with everyone, if we say something, it would go to, let's say, a few people in those organizations. There's no guarantee that it will go beyond them, because then that becomes like a blocking point, right? Will they pass it on? There's 100 things that they're dealing with. They tend to be the most busy people in those organizations, right? So their bandwidth for dealing with their local issues is 100% there, and then dealing with the national issue might not be there. So they're too busy to pass on that message, even with the urgency sometimes that it needs to be passed on. Not only that, it's not usually just passing on a message. It's getting things done. It's registering people. It's coming up with a local strategy that fits in that local context. Let's get people out to vote. We know what we need to do to really encourage them. We know what to say. So coming up with all that, the people who we're communicating with are usually the decision makers. And as you know, with most Muslim organizations, they run on passion, not pounds, right? So they're people who are busy, full-time professionals. They're 100% of the times going into the mosque. Now this message is coming from MCB saying this is also a priority. It's just one more thing that they don't need. So what we need to do is we need to get their buy-in, but we need to have the network built already that they know, that they trust, because it's in their local community who is going to get the job done. And remember, the 500 organizations, they don't represent the whole of the Muslim community. So the large portions that we've missed out, we want to grow that so that we're not missing out key vital parts of the Muslim community, whether it's the Turkish, Bosnian refugees, but also they themselves have limitations on how much of a reach they have. So you could go to a mosque, but what about all the people who don't go to the mosque? What about all the people who aren't allowed in the mosque? Because we still have mosques.
So how are you getting to them?
That's where we have to have our own network in the community that is open and accessible to all. We can't just rely on gatekeepers or the traditional organizations and just say, you know what, the network is fine. We just need to go through the mosques because you miss out. Or the traditional Muslim organizations because you miss out a large portion of the community. But
what about like digital platforms for communication? Like, do you feel that you actually have traction that way or not?
We're starting to grow it, but we need to have, we have less traction than any Muslim influencer we probably have less traction than you, right? So
that probably doesn't take a lot.
yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying is that if you were to say something, this is of urgency and importance to the Muslim community, it would reach more Muslims than if the organization was to say something, which is fine because it's you. But what if it was someone with an agenda, a different agenda, right? What if you decided tomorrow to wake up and become a hardcore anti-vaxxer, or to have like some weird view because people can
I've got
have
plenty of weird views.
yeah, I know, actually. Oh, thank God you don't use it. Your platform badly. But what I mean is that we need Muslim organizations, mainstream organizations that actually have that level of reach, because we don't have it right now. We see it, like we see glimpses, right? Mamdani had that. He was able to get out his messages, even break past the Muslim barrier, which is really impressive, because he had a really good social media and communication strategy. And again, that's somewhere where we need to go. It beggars belief how far we've fallen behind. When Saladin conquered Jerusalem, when he took it back, he didn't enter for 24 to 48 hours. He set up a tent with scribes and anyone in the army who could write, and he told them, write letters to the whole of the Muslim world, giving them the good news before he entered. And he had his own biographer with him. So when people ask, why is Saladin so famous, when there were others like Nuruddin and there were others like Maudud and other like unheralded heroes out there. And one of the reasons was he was very good at PR. He knew how to manage PR, how to get the right information out there, the right stories out there. I'm not saying this in a bad way. It's something that we should be better at. So you're absolutely right. It's a weakness in our armor, and we should be getting that sorted out in our arsenal.
What else is holding you back from making the kind of progress you want to make?
It's a culture change. The culture change within the organization. I mean, within myself, I've learned a lot and been humbled a lot in the last year. But we're trying to change the culture within the organization. We're trying to change the culture within our colleagues. When a disaster happens, when an emergency happens, when something happens, then the expectation is MCB will put out a statement. And it'll be a carefully worded statement. So carefully worded that it means nothing. That it is instantly forgettable. That no one will want to put it out on the news. We can't put out statements anymore in this day and age. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and a video is worth 1,000 pictures. So we need to be putting out videos, and we need to say something of value. We need to shake people. I sometimes, and people think I'm doing this to be bombastic, but I'm genuinely mean this. You have to sometimes say things in ways that make people realize the urgency of the situation. Like when a few years ago in Ramadan we had this 20-hour fasts, right? You had a very short break between iftar and suhoor. And in those long summer nights, a group of young Muslims were coming home from Taraweeh, and they saw a building burning on fire. And they realized that the people inside that high-rise didn't know that the whole building was on fire. And
You're referring to Grenfell?
I'm referring to Grenfell. They raced inside, they ran up the stairs, and they were pounding on the doors, screaming, "Get out, the building's on fire." They didn't knock gently, they didn't ask to be invited in, because every second counted and lives were at stake. We need to act with that level of urgency, unfortunately, with the things that are happening. So when we're talking about things like the employment crisis, or when we're talking things about AI, when we're talking about mental health crises, we tend to talk about it in very sedate, anodyne ways that are almost kind of like, just sit down, it's a problem, we need to... No, what you need to say is what a funeral director told me. I went to a funeral there was a National Burial Council conference where they had 300 funeral directors. So I went up to one of them and I said, "You've seen everything. What's the most horrific thing you've seen?" And he said, in the last week, I buried 3 Muslim teenagers who committed suicide. And I was like, oh man, that is shocking. And he said, "You didn't let me finish my sentence." I said, "What is the end of that sentence?" I also buried 2 elderly Muslims who committed suicide. And I was like, why are elderly Muslims committing suicide? Because I've kind of got immune now to the fact that young Muslims are committing suicide and we're just not talking about it. Why are elderly Muslims committing suicide? And he said, because this community, our community, We were so proud of the fact that we do not put our elderly parents in nursing homes. Everyone else does. We don't. Now we will not put them in nursing homes. So we live in Manchester or we move to America, and these elderly couple or this elderly man or woman, they live by themselves, they struggle by themselves, they get lonely, they get depressed, and they commit suicide. But we don't talk about it. No one will talk about it. No one will mention it. We need to talk about this. We need, like, if we don't have that sense of urgency, then it is a life or death matter. People are dying. There was a child, there's not even one. There are thousands of Muslim children tonight while we're filming this podcast who are thinking about suicide. And there is no plan in place. There are individual organizations doing amazing work, Muslim Youth Helpline, Sukoon, MCAPN, Muslim Mind Collective. There are people who are doing amazing work out there. But there's no plan as a community to say, what are we doing and how are we going to sort this problem out?
How does that plan come about?
It comes about through a sense of urgency, coordination, and then...
No, but let's get really specific here because obviously you've mentioned these factors and urgency, coordination, etc. But let's take this issue now because you mentioned it a couple of times and it is obviously shocking and it needs a clear response. Just in super practical terms, what actually would the next steps be, and what is MCB's role in trying to coordinate things in such a way as to, so that, you know, in a year, 2, 3 years time, you're able to say, yes, the problem is there, but actually here is what is being done about it in a way that I feel, meaning you feel, is satisfactory and actually making progress. Take us on the journey between where we are now and what that might look like.
The journey would be bringing together, so MCB would bring together all the players who are in the Muslim mental health space, because there's so many of them and many of them aren't coordinated, bringing them together and then coming up with a coordinated plan or strategy to deal with young Muslim mental health, right? Like a 5-10 point action plan, practical plan. And that plan would involve having counselors in mosques, rapidly increasing the funding to organizations like Muslim Youth Helpline, having a coordinated social media campaign to young Muslims to tell them that, it's okay to feel depressed. You're not a bad Muslim for doing that, because we tend to put a religious angle on everything, and having the connection with the NHS to produce that that pathway so that young Muslims are more likely to access NHS services, because the statistics were about 97% of Muslims who went into counseling dropped out because they felt it wasn't specific to them. So we can change that very, very easily, because there's a lot of actually Muslim-specific mental counseling available. Having a single point of access, it's a technological thing, and something I still think we can do. If you're an imam or a social worker or a GP, non-Muslim GP, and you see a Muslim young person who has mental health problems, who do you go to? You don't know. Unless you happen to know the right organizations or have the right phone numbers, then you don't know who to go to. There should just be a national campaign to say, this is the one website you go to. And when you enter your details, anyone enters the details, it will connect you to the right organization to go to, the right phone number, the right email address. You could be, as a patient, you could go there. You could refer someone there. It could start upskilling parents into saying, these are the conversations we should be having. When you sit down with your family for iftar, because that's the one time of the year that maybe families will sit down together, then maybe you should broach these subjects. Maybe we should have Muslim scholars who've had mental health crises sit down and talk about it to humanize it. There's a whole campaign that can be developed around it, around funding, around marketing, around resources, around coordination, that would instantly have an impact. And data would be a big part of it. How many Muslims actually are having this problem? And then let's track the data to see what we can do to bring those numbers down. You would work with FOSIS to say every ISOC should have a Muslim mental health champion. Every mosque should have a Muslim mental health first aider. So British Islamic Medical Association is actually working on this, doing mental health first aid in mosques. So eventually, inshallah, we're going to reach a stage where we have a male and a female Muslim mental health first aider in every mosque in the country. All of this is happening. Urgency. Throw your money, throw your energy, throw your resources. If we can coordinate around it, we can make it happen. There's during World War II, even though they lost, the Japanese came up with a really good thing called obeya. Obeya was basically a war room tactic, and Toyota took this on and did it very successfully, where to increase the efficiency and decrease the length of time between an order being strategized and it being delivered on the ground, they would bring all the component levels from general to private, everyone that's needed to make that order happen, into the same war room together. Because then there's no communication gap. Everyone come together. This is the plan. You implement it. Now let's go and do it. And then let's meet up and see that it's happening. We need our own obeya. We need our own war room. We need to make this happen.
So where in that cycle are you right now? Meaning, where is it? Has the MCB started anything in relation to this? And if not, why not?
So where the ability to do all those things requires an organization which has that coordinating body role, the MCB, to have the resources, time, and energy to do it. I wanted to do it for 2026. I'm going to say this openly right now. I said 2026 should be the year of mental health, and we should do exactly all of this. And now reality has caught up with me. Do not have the time, energy, or money to do it. Do not have the people. If we had it, we would do it. We would bring it on, but we just don't have it. But we have the time, energy, and money to build yet another mosque. Everywhere, every 5 minutes, there's another mosque saying we need funding to extend our mosque. Carpet for the mosque, chandelier for the mosque, mosques in random far-flung places that are 3 stories tall with coffee. Like, it's fantastic, but our kids are committing suicide and we're building more buildings. It is absolutely infuriating. I can't tell you how infuriating it is. And you're losing the dressing room. No wonder when they see these buildings go up, the young people of today just feel like it's not mine. It's not my building. It's not for me. You're not investing in me. You're not investing in youth workers. I went on the weekend to the Here for Youth, which brings together youth workers from across the country. We should be celebrating them. There are so many youth organizations, and every one of them is run by volunteers struggling, on top of their day job. And, like I'm a full-time doctor. You need people who are there, who are resourced. If you're going to be serious about it, put the resources there. But I know the problem is that it takes time for us to change. So I'm trying to say there's urgency, lives are at stake, our future is at stake. Let's make that time as short as possible, because if we don't, we're going to pay for it. But
this time, energy, and money, I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying, okay, if the resources were there, well, then that would afford the time and the energy by getting by having the
absolutely
the human resources. But so then it's a money issue. So if that is the core issue, fundraising, sustainability, etc. I mean, what has your experience been in terms of attempting to raise funds in the last year?
I'm bad at it.
I mean, do you have anyone who's good at it?
There are people who are good at it.
No, meaning who's actually doing it for MCB?
It's difficult to do because the tendency is to, you're basically investing in the future, right? You're investing in building a core infrastructure that will deliver something that, where it's a lot easier to invest in bricks and mortar. I can feel, I understand that feeling.
No, but the point is that if you were able to put together I'm trying to understand whether the pitch that you've just sort of laid out, broadly speaking, for this one issue to do with, young people's mental health, for example, right? Mm-hmm. And then here are the outputs, the deliverables, and here is the budget that's required to actually coordinate this. That, as an example, as one packaged product, if you want to say, that you now require funding for. I'm trying to understand whether you've actually gone with that pitch to people who could potentially fund it, or if and then been rejected or faced, and not being funded, or is it that sufficient efforts to actually raise the money in the context of these specific activities just isn't taking place? It's
both. It's a combination of both, I think. And this is where,
when you say you're bad at it, sorry, forgive me, but when you say you're bad at it, I mean, fundraising requires, essentially what you've just done in the first instance. Yes, it needs execution afterwards, but ultimately it's selling the proposition, right? Selling the vision, which you are able to do. So I'm trying to understand whether this fundraising problem for the MCB, which has been a fairly long-standing issue. I think there were periods where it seemed to get better for certain points in time. I'm trying to understand whether it is a consequence of just not packaging things appropriately or directing them appropriately, or is it an actual consequence of people not giving a damn once you present the actual thing to them?
I'm not sure. I haven't done it long enough. Partly it's a consequence of we're trying to change the tires of the car while we're hurtling down the motorway, right? So whilst you're trying to do this, you're also reacting to what happened in Australia. You're also trying to come up with a local election plan. You're also trying to manage build your volunteer team. You're also trying to work out your digital comms and social media strategy. You're also trying to.
But all of those things rely on this one thing, right? Meaning you're a bit. So are you actually trying to do too much? Like if you are trying to change the tires while hurtling down the motorway, there is something called just pressing the brakes and getting onto the hard shoulder, and then taking your time to sort it out so that you can actually now progress in your journey in a way that makes sense.
Sometimes you're not allowed to press the brakes because the community doesn't. The community needs some of this work to continue. So you can't just press the brake because the loss of trust that will come from just saying we're going to take 6 months out to sort out. So what we're doing is we're trying to be much more intentional about focusing on certain things, which is why we still plan to do the mental health thing. That will happen eventually, inshallah. But at the moment, we need to get ourselves into a position where we can come with a good proposition to funders, where we are able to bring all the right players around the table, as opposed to doing it half-assed, basically, and it not working out. So, yeah, time, energy, money is important. That sense of urgency is also very important for people to realize that, hey, this is important. You know, like it's like when somebody comes to you and they see that you're drowning in work and they're like, can I help you? And if you're really, really drowning in work, the time it would take to explain to them how they can help you, you would have actually just, like what you want is someone who can figure out how they can help you and then and plug in. There's a fantastic example. Apologies, I speak in stories of the Sahaba. So the Prophet ﷺ used to go and sit with someone who was dying in Medina. He would go and sit with them until they died, and then help with the ghusl, then do the janazah, and then take them for the burial. And the problem with that was people take a long time to die. Sometimes his whole day would go in that situation. So what the Sahaba did, which they never talked to him about it, Prophet ﷺ never complained. They stopped telling him that somebody was dying. They just didn't tell him. They didn't even tell him when that person died. They would do the ghusl, wrap the body, and then place the body outside the Prophet ﷺ's door towards the left. So when the Prophet ﷺ was going out for the next prayer, so let's say the person died after Zuhr, and the Prophet ﷺ was going for Asr prayer, when he stepped out of his front door, he would see, oh, there's a body there, a shrouded body. And he would say, who is this? And they would say, it's Fulan ibn Fulan, or it's so-and-so. And he would say, okay. And then he would pray the Asr prayer, pray the Janazah prayer, and then they would bury. So they even they put their deaths and their burials into the Prophet ﷺ's schedule without asking him, because they realized this is the most important man that's ever lived. We need to value his time and his energy, and so we will put our funerals into his schedule, and that's something that is something we could do as well. That we could say, look, there's a lot going on. Where can we find, where can we find our way of supporting that bigger effort? It's something that MCB should be doing itself, to be honest.
I kind of lost the connection between the lesson from that story and what exactly the point you were trying to make.
I think the lesson from the story is that putting the onus on MCB, saying MCB needs to work out how to fix its own funding problem, fix its own digital problem, fix its own recruitment problem, fix its own all problems, means that it's going to take a long time, because MCB has a lot of other things to be doing at the same time while it's doing those things. If there are people, and this is a shameless call out to volunteers, if you want to get involved, there's a few brothers, for example, got involved and said, we can transform your website to make it into a more digital hub for the Muslim community. And they just did it. and we came in and said, well, X, Y, and Z needs to change. You need to be cognizant of this. But they just went and did it. As opposed to, tell me about a website. How would you, like, I don't have time to sit into 100 meetings on how to develop a website or what a good website would look like. Like, just Google it, do it yourself, right? You tell me what gold standard is, present 3 options to me, and I choose. And that's how we move on with urgency. If I was in a resus situation, going back to that red phone, I don't have the time for someone to tell me, let me talk you through the different options and that you can work out. No, this is a resus. This person's life is at stake. I'm going to be barking orders saying, you do this, you do that. And if you've got a good idea, then you come with it to the table and add it in a way that fits in with what we're doing to try to save the life, or else just keep it to yourself.
Sure. But the difference in that situation is that the person is funded and is secure and therefore is able to put the time and energy into doing that coordination. So it still seems to me that whilst I understand what you're saying in terms of there are lots of balls that are being juggled, the central infrastructure for the core reason for existing as an organization doesn't exist. I mean, so then to pretend to be able to do all of the stuff that you want to do before that kind of central core is set just seems to be a little bit putting the cart before the horse, meaning actually it would make sense to disproportionately, like if most of the last year had been spent on really sorting out this funding issue, right, in a sustainable way, then we could have a different kind of conversation about what we can actually start to do.
It's a chicken and egg scenario. You're right. It's a chicken and egg scenario because if you spend most of the year trying to get funding without actually doing anything to show people won't want to fund you. People fund what exists. People,
that's not necessarily true because obviously in the, it's in fact, I'd argue almost the opposite nowadays. People back people and they back a vision, and that's how startups get their seed funding and what have you. Yes, they need to show some kind of what do you call it, MVP, right? Minimum viable product. But there is enough of a history in the organization to show like some of the benefits. There's enough, sort of, I would say, the right combination of humility and determination in you to recognize where the gaps are, but also to be able to sell a better outcome. Actually, a lot of the issues that you've spoken about, I think people are and would be moved by, sufficiently in order to and have the awareness and in order to back it. I just feel that I just feel it's a shame that we're still talking about like the funding issue because almost 30 years into the organization, right? And the reality is that I've always felt that the onus or if I'm not a blame person generally speaking, but I think the organization just needs to take the blame for not having raised the money that it needs to have raised to be at the level it needs to be at. And I think a lot of that's to do with, I think there is the appetite. Like I think we can never, a little bit like with the NZF situation, in the early days, like we could have just sat and said, well, no one's going to believe this or no one wants to do the local stuff or whatever. But you just kept banging the drum and just kept telling the story and, frankly, it wouldn't really take no for an answer. You know what I mean? Like you got to.
I take that point completely. I think definitely there is a gap over there, and the blame is primarily with us. I can't blame anyone else for not funding because no one has entitlement to funding. So I take that point. I think we definitely need to do better.
So just to maybe break it down, in case there are some wealthy people watching this, or even not wealthy but who want to support, like what budget did the organization work with in 2025?
But if there are people who want to support, I want people more than the money.
No, you don't. You need money. You need money to get the dedicated people to then coordinate large numbers of volunteers and other organizations and what have you. So I would say so. Let's go back.
This is why I'm terrible at fundraising, isn't it?
Well, you have to. Yeah. Well, you have to. I mean, I suppose you have to want it.
You're doing a better job on this podcast than I have.
I'm trying on your behalf. What else then? What haven't we spoken about that you think is worth?
There's a distinct. I just wish that we had an ambition mindset in the community. It just feels like we're shortchanging ourselves, commensurate to the potential that we have. I've been reading a lot about, I have an interest in space race and space travel. And, in early 1960s America, they had problems with civil rights, women's rights, communism, so many different problems that they were dealing with. And in that scenario, you had the American president, John F. Kennedy, get up at Rice University, and he gave a speech where he didn't go on about the problems like I just have for the last hour or so. He said, we're going to the moon. And the ingredients and the metals that they needed to get to the moon, some of those didn't even exist. So they had to discover things to be able to build the rocket ships to be able to go to the moon. We're going to the moon, and we're going to put a man on the moon and bring him back before the end of this decade. And the reason we do this, he goes, we do this because it is hard, not because it is easy. We do this because it will marshal the best of our abilities. We do this because it will give our nation a positive target to aim for. And lo and behold, 1969, before the end of the decade, Neil Armstrong is on the moon. And the average age in mission control in Houston was 25. So everyone in mission control, the average age of those people was 25. That means they were in school when Kennedy gave that speech. That's the power of a vision and an ambitious vision unleashed on the general public. And I feel like the Muslim community, we need that as well. We need to have a target. We need to say the Muslim community is going to find the cure for cancer. Muslims in this world, we have the skills, we have the talent, we have the intelligence out there. We're going to find the cure for cancer by 2050. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the Prophet ﷺ said that there's no disease without a cure except aging or death. Well, we're going to find the cure for cancer. Why can't we? Why should we leave it for somebody else to do it? And if we do that, the process of us being ambitious towards a target like that is going to force us to build the infrastructure, the systems, the mindset to get ourselves off our feet, to change our trajectory from where we are right now to where we want to be. Not just, we want to build the first electric airplane. We want to be the ones who get to Mars. We didn't get to the moon. We mapped the stars, but we didn't get to the stars. Now we want to be the ones who get to Mars. Why should we leave it to somebody else? And if we set ourselves ambitious targets, not just technological targets, but targets like, environmental targets about bringing people together, I think we can make a huge difference. Which is why I'm convinced in this country, the positive aims of the MCB should be focused on things like the economy, like the NHS, like housing, not just Islamophobia. Islamophobia is important. Gaza is important. Sudan is important. All of these things are important, but there's also positive impact that we can have on the economy, on the NHS, and on housing. We can rethink why should somebody else come out with a strategy to fix the NHS, the most important healthcare system that's been built in the last 100 years, free at the point of use, where the Queen and a beggar on the street can get the same level of healthcare. And it's clearly falling apart. It's clearly on its last legs, struggling. Somebody needs to fix it, or we go private, in which case our community will be the first to suffer. Why can't it be the Muslims? But if our mindset is on how do we solve Islamophobia in the NHS, if that's our priority, then I think we're missing that ambitious picture of how are we going to fix the NHS. Because can you imagine what it would be like if we could fix the NHS? That will solve your Islamophobia crisis for you. That will solve your healthcare crisis for you. So I feel like there's a lack of ambition in the Muslim community, and we need to become ambitious. We need to think big. We need to stop thinking PFC and start thinking KFC, international, global, expansive mindset.
It was a strange example to use when we just
talked about health.
Well, exactly.
I was getting
you
hungry.
spoke against fried chicken, and now you're like, think KFC.
Yeah, fried chicken is fine in moderation.
Okay, but what accounts for this lack of ambition? What is the underlying or the root cause of this? I don't know, almost like causeless community.
We're not causeless. We have causes, but we're constantly reacting, right? Gaza is our cause because it's in the news because somebody attacked Gaza. It wasn't our cause then. Sudan's our cause now because it's the biggest genocide in our times. And then somebody else will be. It's usually a reactive cause. Having a proactive cause requires a community that's confident, right? And a community that not only is confident but has a different mindset that sees itself not as a victim, but as the author of its own story, right? It's a small nuance, but when the Prophet ﷺ turned up in Medina, you know, what was he? He was a refugee from Medina. He did not call himself a refugee. He called himself a immigrant. I proactively chose this step, right? It's by the by that they were chasing me and trying to kill me. I proactively chose this step. I am never the victim, right? I'm never the victim. And we need to get out of this mindset. It doesn't mean that Islamophobia doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that people can't attack us. But if you stop seeing yourself as a victim, and our leadership needs to stop seeing itself like that, I'm telling you, it's upsetting sometimes. And I'm not saying this, I'm not pushing down leadership because I'm one of them now, unfortunately. But if you look on a WhatsApp group during the genocide of the top Muslim leaders in the country and a WhatsApp group of teenagers, Muslim teenagers, there's no difference. They're just sharing.
In what sense?
They're just sharing the same videos. Oh my God, look at this, what happened. Look at what happened. We're not in the solutions mindset. We're not like, how do, like what's happening on our screens is basically a wake-up call that's telling us that we are people who have been happy with the trappings of power or the illusion of power, but no actual power. So how do we actually build power in this community? What is real power? Economic power, political power, strategic power. What is that? What does that mean? And how do we build it? That conversation is not happening. I can understand it not happening on the group of teenagers, but if it's not happening on the group of Muslim leaders, if they're also saying, look at this, astaghfirullah, people are dying. Yes, you should be, but you need to move. Like, we don't need another companion in the shipwreck. Right? We need a lighthouse on the shore. We need someone who's got a plan. And if you haven't got a plan, then what's the point of being a leader, right?
But again, that's where we're all looking to you, right?
No one's looking to me, but
no. But the thing is, I think you need to own that one, because meaning you just need to, I know in the few conversations that we've had, say in the last year or so, like there seems to be this kind of, I don't know, like a discomfort with leadership that in some ways you can't afford to have, in a sense that the whole organization is set up in such a way, or its purported kind of purpose is, again, to represent, to have the plan, to do that coordination, etc. So you can't be if someone's going to take on that role, you had obviously, and you spoke to this Vision 2050, etc. Then you're the guy who we're looking to for the narrative, I suppose.
It's not because of humility. It's because it's like I feel like when you crown those Abbasid Khalifas of Baghdad, who you say you are the Khalifa. But his power literally extends to the wall of his bedroom. That's it. He has no power. He has no authority. If he says something, no one listens. Even his servant can come and kill him or beat him. That's how I feel.
And that sounds pretty
right? And probably
depressing.
Yeah, it's depressing. So you're saying you are the leader of the Muslim community, but if I sit with anyone from any other community, I see that they have actual power. We have no actual power. As a community, not just myself, as a community, we don't have power. We go and protest about Palestine on the weekend. There's a guy called Robert Moses. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's the architect of New York, and there's lots of books written about him. And so he built New York to be in a certain way because he had some racist views, segregationist views, and so on and so forth. So he built the architecture of New York, the roads, the bridges, so that trains couldn't go to certain areas, so to keep them from transferring out, black into white neighborhoods and stuff like that. And there were a group of people who were arguing about going left or right in a certain direction on something. And he got annoyed and he said, you think that you have choice because you get to choose whether you go left or right. He goes, never forget, I built the roads, right? Your choices are completely dependent on my whims. When the government lets us protest on a weekend, they let us go on a weekend because it's controlled protests. You go on a weekend and you go and shout and scream outside empty buildings, while all the decision makers are on the weekend at home, not even watching what you're doing. And it's all cleaned up so that by the time they come back on Monday morning for work to get on with the business of running the country, all trace of your protest is gone. And if it wasn't for social media, then they wouldn't even know about it.
But how does that relate to, in your case, power or lack of?
We need to stop the trappings of power. If I go and meet a minister, there's no power involved there. I take a selfie with them. There's no power involved. If I write a letter, strongly worded letter to the Prime Minister, there's no power. File it in the bin, right? There's no power involved.
Why is that?
Because they know exactly how much my weight my word carries. They know exactly how much is behind us. They know how much money is behind us. They know how much organization capacity we have. They know how much the Muslim community is going to rally around a cause. Even during a genocide, literally less than 50% voted. I'm not going to be interested in a community that's not really economically powerful, that they're not going to invest in the political system, or they're not going to invest strategically. They're going to invest in building a bigger mosque, right? I don't need to worry about this community, right? This community that's going to get diabetes by the age of 40 and then get a heart attack at 50, I don't need to worry about that community. There's no power involved there. This community that we can buy off with a couple of selfies, maybe make one of them a lord or this or that. Nobody's interested. That is the problem. If we are serious, if you want to stop the next Gaza, because the next one will happen. The next one will happen. There's nothing stopping it. If you want to be in a position to be able to stop the next Gaza, then you need to build power.
I understand where you're coming from, but I also kind of struggle with almost the framing of it in very combative terms, almost, meaning that the almost where power becomes the objective, and then where also, which has been a lot of the narrative in the last couple of years, where new initiatives, new efforts, new attempts at coordination are all motivated by, okay, so that next time, an international crisis or a genocide or whatever is taking place, so that we'll be taken seriously. I think partly that framing is the issue. It's not to say that we don't want it to be the case that at a point in time that there is the capability or the ability to be taken seriously in relation to whichever international issue needs addressing. But I think it's not a strong motivation, or it's not kind of where the motivation should be. Meaning there's something deeper, right? That should stem from one's faith, values, worldview, a sense of that contribution mindset, more akin to what you were saying earlier in terms of the willingness and the ambition to kind of solve problems and bring a positive or flourishing, prosperous kind of situation in the area where you can actually have a direct influence. As a result of which, power influence becomes a natural byproduct. As a result of which, you're then more influential, in the context of these broader situations. I think that framing is really critical, because if we just say to people, well, look, Gaza happened, look, you were powerless. Now let's work for to become powerful, so that when that happens again, we will be taken seriously. I kind of get the logic, but I don't think that's a very strong way to frame the thing.
I agree with you. I think if you frame it solely as that, then it's power for the sake of power. It becomes nefarious. It becomes, like we want influence, etc. I think maybe it would have been framed better to say not just power for the sake of power, but we should have the carrot and the stick. And right now, we're putting a lot of emphasis on the carrot, but we have no stick. We have nothing that says, that we get taken seriously beyond our value and contribution. So we're doing a lot of, look, Muslims contribute to NHS, we contribute to society, etc., etc. And there is power, that soft power that comes from that. But there should also be our ability to be a pressure group for what we believe in, to stand up for what we believe in. We're not going to force anyone to do anything. We don't have the ability to do that. We are a minority, But to be taken seriously, we didn't. I think definitely during the Gaza crisis, Muslim community didn't feel like it was taken seriously, didn't feel that it was listened to.
Sure.
And in order to change that, there is that aspect of doing more to be valued and be of value, but also to say that we are not to be taken we should not be taken lightly, because we are part of this community, and we're not just we're not going to be bought off by photo ops and handshakes and things like that.
Okay. So if I'm to summarize all of this, what I've understood or taken away from what you've said is that you have a situation where a number of the metrics by which you might measure the health of a community are looking pretty appalling, really, when it comes to the Muslim community in Britain. There is some awareness of that, but not enough urgency in terms of trying to actually respond to that. There are lots of impressive grassroots initiatives that are running more on, like you said, passion rather than actual, sort of proper funding and maybe proper structure sometimes. And the MCB itself, whose function it is to coordinate, to bring a sense of maybe binding vision to the community, to bring different parts of this diverse community together, itself is struggling for funding in such a way that would allow it to give it enough of that time and energy to pull all these disparate pieces together and give some sort of unified sense of cause, direction, etc. to this community. I mean, is that a fair summary?
It's a fair summary. I paint a bleak picture, and I want to just correct that there are things that we are improving in. We're improving in education, for example, but so it's not that we're doing terribly in all the places. Is for one thing, we're not sure how we're doing because we don't have like that kind of bird's eye view. But just because you're doing well in some places, in some contexts, and sometimes doesn't mean that there's a huge opportunity being missed by us not coordinating, by us not having that sense of urgency. And if I had a message to the Muslim community, it would be, if you're a bystander, then get on the pitch and play, get involved. There are many ways to get involved in different organizations, different projects. If you are already involved, then start coordinating with others who are in the same sector. And if you are coordinated, then let's move to that next level with urgency. Let's have an ambitious goal and let's move towards it with urgency. Let's undergo the evolution that we would normally undergo in the next 10, 20 years. Let's do that in the next 1 or 2, inshallah, with a sense of, not just a sense of urgency, but a sense of unity and passion that, inshallah, we can turn this community around. We've set this Vision 2050, as a benchmark of where we want to go, and we think we can, if we put our mind to it as a community, there is nothing that we can't do. Inshallah, there's nothing that we can't do. We've shown that during COVID. We've shown that during Gaza, and we will show it again. But it requires each one of us, inshallah, to kind of take that step to move from whatever state we're in to that next level, and to have that sense of urgency to say, you know what, the building is on fire. We're all in Grenfell, basically. The building is on fire, and we need to move quickly, knock on those doors, save as many lives as we can, and do that in a coordinated manner, inshallah.
And then in terms of the 2026 specifically, the first year of this next quarter of a century now to get to this 2050 point, given that we've said, okay, perhaps I'm going to suggest that the priorities are money, messaging, coordination. What specific things can you say you really want to try and achieve, in 2026?
We have so this Ramadan, we're going to try to showcase all of those three things. So this Ramadan, we're going to make it about political empowerment. Everything is politics this Ramadan, basically. So we're going to, the food that you eat is political. The people that are around the table is political. The way that we have or do not have a combined Eid is political. All these things, because we want to educate the Muslim community on politics and motivate and inspire them to register to vote for the local elections that are coming up literally a month after Ramadan. So that's, and by doing so, we're going to hopefully help coordinate, inshallah. We're working with other organizations who work in the space, but we're also going to hopefully showcase to the Muslim community why we are worth investing in. Why you will see glimpses through our messaging as well, because we're going to try something we haven't done before. We actually have a AI Dream Factory, so you'll see on MCB's social media there'll be 2 videos going out every single day. Quality might not be amazing, but the quantity is there, and that's an AI system. Like literally, AI takes the videos, splices them, captions them, and sends them out every single day. And we're trying to lean into like more authentic messaging built around educating our community, more videos around that. So that's going to be the first aspect of it. And then our AGM is coming up in July, inshallah. That's going to be around mental health. We might not be able to do the whole thing, but hopefully kickstarting that coordination piece. And then what happens after that will be depending on who takes over after me.
Cool. Well, are you intending to stand for re-election?
I don't know. If there's someone better, then I probably won't.
Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Wajid Akhter, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Wishing you the very best. I don't envy you, to be honest. I know it's a very difficult task, but yeah, I pray that things go. Well, I was going to say from strength to strength, but from relative weakness to strength. Yeah, and I pray all your efforts are accepted and blessed.
I mean, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.